Hello beautiful people, my name is Vendi and this is my spoilery review of The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. As I said, this review will have spoilers, so if you haven't read it yet, definitely do before you sit down to watch this video. If you're not so fussed about spoilers, I'll be including a brief synopsis before I get into my feelings, so without further ado, let's get started. The Cruel Prince follows Jude, a human girl who was whisked away into the land of Fairy, along with her twin sister Taryn and her Fae half-sister Vivienne, after Vivienne's biological father and member of the gentry Maddox kills Jude and Taryn's parents. After the trauma of losing her parents, Jude sort of assimilates into the world of the Fae. As a member of the gentry, she attends classes with the higher class Fae and is afforded certain protections that others wouldn't. Despite these protections, Jude and Taryn find themselves at the butt of a lot of bullying because they're human and they have little rounded ears instead of pointed ones. And because they're in the land of Fae, this bullying is a little bit more deadly than it would be in the human world. As a result of all this, Jude decides that the best way to keep herself and her family safe is to gain some semblance of power in the world of the Fae. She gets involved with some kind of sketchy people and gets into situations that would be way over the head of just about anyone else. She finds herself in the middle of a fight for the High King's crown. And as a human, that's a pretty dangerous situation to be in, so she has to find out how to navigate through all that to survive, let alone thrive in this world. I absolutely adored this book. Holly Black is a masterful storyteller and her world of Fae is, I think, my favorite one that I've ever read. So starting with the setting of The Cruel Prince is in Holly Black's specific fairy, and Holly Black's fairy isn't the kind that you see in a lot of YA today where there's like a lot of black and white, good versus bad, where fairies are generally the good guys and humans are kind of the bad guys. It's far more traditional with the actual folklore and mythology regarding fairies, where they're neither good nor bad, they just don't see people as being on the same level as them, and so they're very often seen as cruel. And there's little bits of world building that Holly throws in to just remind you that you're in Fairy all the time. Like Jude makes a remark at a Fairy revel that unless she has somebody to pull her out, if she starts dancing in the crowd, she will dance until her feet bleed and she dies. It's just little things like that, little brush strokes of world building that turn this into this lush, imaginative, super vivid place. It's very true to Holly Black's other portrayals of Fairy, and I know part of that is because all of her stories that include the Fae are set in the same universe. There are several cameos from characters from the Tithe series as well as the Darkest Part of the Forest, which as a longtime fan, it was just really good to see these characters that I'd fallen in love with in previous stories just sort of tucked away into nice, neat little packages within The Cruel Prince as well. But true to form, Holly Black's scene descriptions are just absolutely beautiful. You can tell with every word that the setting is magical, even without Jude's little one-liner hints as to the world of Fairy not being quite like the world of the humans. You would know it was magical just because of the way it was written. So Holly Black's Tithe series was very much urban fantasy, and I feel like The Cruel Prince is that perfect blend of urban fantasy and high fantasy, where fairyland is very decidedly separate from the human world, but they're very close together and they commingle strongly. The mentions of the human world are far more than just illusions. They're very much presented as a real part of living even in the heart of the High King's court. And if the Fae world setting ever got confusing, The Cruel Prince opens with this beautiful map of the setting. It's just wonderful and hand-drawn, and it really helps you pinpoint where the characters are at any point in time. So the setting was absolutely beautiful, and what really surprised me is despite all this wonderful writing that sort of painted this picture in your head, the scene descriptions never once got in the way of the plot. So the plot of The Cruel Prince started out kind of slow. If you've ever seen one of those videos of a old school train leaving a station where it starts out slow and then it picks up speed and then it gets faster and faster and faster and faster until it's just going full speed ahead and you can't even process how fast it's going, that's sort of what the plot of The Cruel Prince was like for me. And along with the plot, the stakes of the story kept rising. So Jude starts off in fairy school getting bullied by a cast of characters who are basically just rich fairy nobility. There's Cardan, the Cruel Prince, and his friends Nicasia, Locke, and Valerian. And their mission seems to be making Jude and Taryn's life absolutely miserable because they're human. And then it just gets dark. Jude finds herself tangling with a group of assassins slash spies for the prince who seems to be next in line for the crown, and she gets involved in some really heavy stuff. She goes from being a pawn to one of the key players in this game of political intrigue and assassinations and the murder of an entire royal family, and she doesn't even seem to be intentionally doing it. She's just trying to make her own personal life better. I've heard The Cruel Prince described as a sort of fairy YA Game of Thrones, and I have to say it's not entirely an inaccurate description. As a human who's lived in Fae her whole life, Jude is pretty well equipped to handle this situation. And speaking of Jude, actually speaking of characters in general, Holly Black knows character. If you follow me on Goodreads or on here, then you know that I love morally gray characters, and that I need for everyone's motivations to make some sort of sense. There is not a single character in The Cruel Prince who I don't understand in some way. They all very much act like the protagonists of their own stories, which is the way that real people do in real life, and I'm a giant fan of that. Even like little side characters that show up for a page or just a scene or two have fully fleshed out personalities. It seems like Holly Black knows exactly what everyone wants and exactly what they're willing to do to get it. And now, speaking of Jude, there's been some debate as to what kind of a character she is. I've heard a couple of pretty unsympathetic reviews about Jude that I don't think really give her the affordances that she deserves. Jude is a trauma survivor. When she was little more than a baby, she had to see her mother and father killed in front of her by the man who she now lives with and is being raised by. A man who, having spent most of her life living in his home, she's come to care for and even love. That sort of cognitive dissonance is something that's really tough to handle under any situation, and Jude is in a pretty constant survival situation all the time. She and her sister Taryn could literally die any day just for being human, and they're reminded of this pretty mercilessly by their classmates and by just about everyone in the court, including their stepmother. They both just want to feel safe, and the way Jude thinks she's gonna find her safety is by finding a place where she belongs. She's such a lost girl. It breaks my heart. I love her so much, and it hurts because every time she thinks she's found a situation where she's even a little bit likely to find a place where she belongs, like a found family, she clings to it like it's the last thing in this entire world that she cares about. And that's ridiculously understandable. Of course she's gonna put her loyalties with people who value her. Of course she's gonna pledge her loyalty to somebody who says he can protect her from being hurt and abused in this world where she's only ever faced hurt and abuse. Some people have criticized Jude for acting inhumane, but I mean, keep in mind that she's been raised in Fairy, far away from humans for the majority of her life. It makes sense that the people she acts like are the ones that she was raised around, which in her case happens to be a fairy general, specifically a redcap, which, if you know anything about Holly Black's Fae, are some of the bloodthirstiest kind around. Also, honor is a huge thing for the Fae, so her dueling with Taryn for taking her honor when it turns out Taryn has been dating Locke, who is kind of Jude's beau, is completely understandable. She's not mad at Taryn for taking her man. She's mad at Taryn for betraying her. Taryn is the only person she really trusted to be on her side 100%, and then that was taken. That said, Taryn's actions make a lot of sense too. She's also a trauma survivor. She's also trying to survive. It's just that her methods of doing so don't match with Jude. I don't know. I feel like you need to give both of these girls a little more sympathy. I feel like they're really trying the absolute best they can with the cards they've been dealt, and it's a pretty crap hand that they've been given. So there's a couple of things that I would have liked to see a little bit more of in The Cruel Prince. Oak, Jude and Taryn's younger stepbrother, ends up being a huge player towards the end once all of the plot points sort of come together. I would have liked Jude to have spent a little more time with him so that we as readers care about him a little more. I feel like it could have been done in a way that wouldn't give away that he was crucial to the plot unfolding. Jude's desire for a family of any sort could have easily been put on Oak's shoulders, and I feel like that would have been completely in line with her characterization up until that point. Additionally, I would have liked her to spend a little more time with Cardan. I'm such a sucker for the enemies to lovers trope, and I have a feeling that that's what's gonna happen between Jude and Cardan, and their little angsty dynamic is just the best, and I want more of it. I am really happy that, you know, despite their little kiss, which I live for, they didn't just fall in love in book one. I'm happy that their relationship is going to take some work, but I still would have liked to see a few more interactions where Cardan maybe hints at the fact that he's not the absolute piece of flaming garbage that we believe him to be for the majority of the book. Speaking of flaming garbage, but like my favorite flaming garbage, I want more of the Court of Shadows. Jude's little found family under the service of Prince Dane, so the Roach, the Bomb, and the Ghost, are perhaps my favorite characters in the whole story, including the favorites who made cameos from Holly's previous books. I just loved their bantery dynamic, and I loved that they were wild fae, meaning they had no particular allegiance to any court, and as wild fae they treated Jude more humanely than the gentry did. So I absolutely loved how they sort of just welcomed her into their fold, and I love that it was reluctant because none of these people are going to be very trusting of one another, but they're still so sweet, and their motivations are very much get rich and cause mayhem, and I love them. I want a book just focusing on the three of them where they like get up to some shenanigans. I don't even know what. I just want to see more of them overall. And that's really all I have to say for now. I'm sure the moment I edit and upload this video, I'm gonna realize that there's about a gazillion other things that I want to mention, but then this video would be like 4 days long and no one has time to watch that, and I don't have time to film and edit that. So without further ado, I think that's it from me. If you've read The Cruel Prince, leave a comment down below and let's just talk about it together because I need to. Or if you've read any of Holly's other books, let's talk about those as well. But that's it from me, guys. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.